Hello, this is another episode of the Bacon After Dark podcast, and I think it's the third in the series.
Yeah, I believe so. Number 3.
Right, awesome. But, for today's deep dive,
Huh.
we are getting into something really wild. Imagine you've just made a huge, complex decision at work.
Okay.
Or maybe you just finished studying some incredibly dense topic. How do you actually know you got it right?
Right. How do you trust your own brain?
Exactly. Because what if I told you that being incredibly smart, like having a high IQ, might actually make you more likely to make catastrophic mistakes?
Which sounds completely backwards, I know.
It really does. Imagine someone with an off-the-charts IQ, absolute genius. They analyze a massive problem, make a bold decision, and then just drive the whole project straight into the ground.
Yeah, we see it all the time.
Why does that happen? Because they lack one specific, highly trainable mental skill. So our mission today is to deep dive into this stack of sources we have, including some really phenomenal research from Nature and Oxford Academic.
Some really heavy-hitting papers there.
Oh, absolutely. And we're exploring this concept called metacognition. We're going to figure out what it is, how it actually physically alters the architecture of your brain,
Yeah.
and, why our society is so desperately lacking it right now.
And, crucially, how you can actually train it so you don't end up being a highly confident fool.
Right. Nobody wants that.
Yeah.
So let's just lay the groundwork here. What exactly is this? Because it sounds kind of, I don't know, like a mystical buzzword.
Yeah, it's really not some mystical state of enlightenment, I promise. It is a biological, highly measurable capacity that complements regular intelligence.
Okay.
Stripped down to its absolute core, metacognition is just the awareness and the active regulation of your own thinking process.
So it's the brain observing itself.
Exactly. It's the brain stepping back and saying, how am I doing here? Is this thought process actually working?
Okay, let's unpack this a bit, because I really want to draw a hard line between this and what we traditionally call intelligence.
Yeah.
Raw IQ.
Right. They are very different things.
Because we've been fed this narrative forever that processing speed and logic, just the raw horsepower of the brain, is the ultimate gold standard for everything.
Yeah, society loves the high IQ.
Right. But reading through the research in Nature, I started thinking about this in automotive terms. Tell me if this works.
Let's hear it.
If raw IQ is like the massive roaring horsepower of a V8 engine, then metacognition feels like the steering wheel, the brakes, and maybe the driver constantly checking the GPS.
Oh, that distinction is incredibly important. And the literature highlights exactly this vulnerability.
Really? So the car analogy holds up.
It holds up perfectly because IQ measures how fast your engine can go, right? How efficiently it processes fuel. But metacognition governs how those abilities are actually deployed in a chaotic environment.
Ah, okay.
Having a high IQ without metacognitive skill is honestly a massive liability. It produces reasoning that the researchers describe as highly confident but entirely brittle.
Wait, let me challenge that for a second.
Sure.
If someone has a massive amount of processing power, a huge engine, shouldn't they just automatically be better at noticing when they've made an error?
You would think so, right?
Yeah. Doesn't more brain power mean you process your own mistakes faster?
You would naturally assume that, but the data points in a totally different direction. High IQ individuals who lack metacognition tend to use their formidable processing power to simply rationalize their first instincts.
Oh, wow. So they just invent better excuses?
Exactly. Faster and more effectively than anyone else. They trust their raw engine implicitly. So when they encounter contradictory evidence, they don't hit the brakes.
They just press the accelerator.
They slam on the gas and use their intelligence to argue away the anomaly. And that is exactly why their reasoning is called brittle.
Because it can't bend.
Right. When reality finally breaks their mental model, the whole thing just shatters because it had absolutely no flexibility.
Confident but brittle. Man, that is just like strapping a rocket engine to a shopping cart.
That's a great visual.
You're going to go blindingly fast, but the moment you hit a pebble, the entire apparatus just disintegrates.
Now, contrast that with the findings on individuals with a more modest IQ.
Okay, the smaller engines.
Right, the smaller engines, but who possess highly developed metacognition. The research shows they actually become much more careful, adaptive learners.
So they outmaneuver the rocket carts.
They really do. The literature breaks their process down into 3 core actions. First, planning an approach before acting. Second, monitoring their progress in real time.
And the third.
Crucially, revising their strategies the absolute second an error is detected.
Revising strategies. So they don't view a mistake as like a threat to their ego.
Not at all.
They just view it as a GPS recalculation. Route changed.
Exactly the case. They pivot. They are perfectly comfortable stepping back and saying, my initial hypothesis is failing. I need a new tool.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, though. It's very easy for us to sit here and talk about this as a personality trait, right?
Yeah.
Or just a good habit your mentor taught you. But the excerpts from Nature include functional MRI data. So when scientists put people in a brain scanner, are we talking about an actual physical, structural difference in the brains of people who do this well?
We absolutely are. We are looking at profound biological differences. Metacognition does not just live in some abstract psychological ether.
It's physical hardware.
Yes, it relies on a very specific distributed prefrontal parietal network. The scans reveal that people who consistently score high on these tasks show stronger activation across these nodes.
Wow.
And over time, because of neuroplasticity, repeated use of this network leads to functional and partly structural differences.
Structural differences.
Yeah.
So by thinking about thinking, you are literally laying down thicker neurological cables in your head.
You're building a stronger brain, yeah.
But what does this network actually look like? Because the sources listed some incredibly dense anatomical names, and it sounded less like a single, metacognition center and more like a whole committee.
Committee is the perfect way to visualize it. Think of this brain network as a corporate board of directors inside your head, working in real time to audit your reality.
Okay, I like that. Who's on the board?
Let's look at the specific nodes from the research. First, you have the rostrolateral and lateral prefrontal cortex.
Say that 3 times fast.
I know, right? But think of these regions as the CEO and the primary self-monitoring station. Their job is to encode your confidence signals.
What does that mean, practically?
They assign a probability to your thoughts. They tell you, I am 90% sure this data is correct, or I am completely guessing right now.
Okay, so that's the CEO calibrating the confidence. Who else is on this board?
Next is the anterior cingulate. You can think of this as your chief risk officer.
The risk officer, okay.
It's the brain's alarm system for conflict and uncertainty. Imagine you were reading an article that perfectly aligns with your political views.
Right, you're nodding along.
Exactly, but there is a glaring logical leap in the third paragraph. Your anterior cingulate is the mechanism that flares up, creating that subtle feeling of cognitive friction.
Oh, it's that tiny, nagging voice in the back of your head saying, wait a minute, that math doesn't add up.
Correct. It's saying, hold on, there is a conflict here. And when the chief risk officer sounds that alarm, the parietal regions step in.
And what's their title?
They act as your research department. Their biological function in this network is to accumulate evidence.
Okay, so they start digging.
Yeah, they start pulling in sensory data from your environment to help resolve the conflict that the anterior cingulate just flagged.
And there was one more mentioned in the Nature piece, right? The hippocampal links.
Yes, the archives. The hippocampal links support what researchers call meta-memory.
Meta-memory.
Right. It's your awareness of your own memory storage. It's the network that interrogates your brain to figure out whether you actually remember a specific fact or if you just feel a sense of familiarity and assume you know it.
Okay, let me pause and just synthesize this, because this feels incredibly profound.
It really is.
When we talk about this intricate network, the CEO assigning confidence, the risk officer flagging doubt, the archives verifying memories, are we basically just looking at a biological scan of human consciousness?
That is a staggering question.
Like, is this metacognitive network the actual biological footprint of the soul or the self that philosophers have been arguing about for thousands of years?
It bridges neuroscience and philosophy perfectly, doesn't it? Now, a neuroscientist will carefully avoid terms like soul.
Of course, yeah.
But what we are looking at in these scans is absolutely the biological foundation of self-awareness. It is the physical mechanism that allows a human being to step outside their immediate primal urges and observe their own existence.
That is wild.
Without this prefrontal parietal network, we are basically just stimulus response machines. With it, we possess an internal observer.
Which makes it all the more crazy to me that we don't use it constantly.
You'd think we would.
Right. If this board of directors is what makes us uniquely self-aware, if it prevents catastrophic errors, and it physically strengthens our brains, why is it so rare? Why aren't we all walking around constantly auditing our own thoughts?
You've hit on the core friction of this entire deep dive. The text specifically highlights that metacognition carries severe motivational costs.
Motivational costs.
Yes, it is metabolically and psychologically expensive.
But hold on, from an evolutionary standpoint, that seems totally backwards.
How so?
Wouldn't the cost of making a fatal error in the wild, like eating a poisonous berry because you're overconfident, Would that be much higher than the calorie cost of just double-checking your logic?
That's a fair point.
Why would our brains evolve to avoid the very thing that keeps us from making disastrous mistakes?
It all comes down to how the brain optimizes for energy. The brain is fundamentally a prediction machine that seeks cognitive ease.
It wants the easy path.
Always. Processing information seamlessly and acting on instinct burns very little glucose. It feels fluent, it feels natural, and it feels safe.
Okay, I see.
Metacognition, on the other hand, forces you into cognitive strain. It burns a tremendous amount of energy to activate that entire board of directors we just discussed.
So you get physically tired.
Yes, and furthermore, psychologically, it is deeply uncomfortable because it actively exposes your own uncertainty, your biases, and your flaws.
Ah, so it's a double whammy. It burns your physical energy and hurts your ego.
Exactly.
It's like looking in a harsh fluorescent lit mirror. To go back to our driving analogy, it's that awful sinking realization when you've confidently driven 20 miles in the wrong direction.
We've all been there.
To engage metacognition, you have to admit you were wrong, physically turn the car around, and face the fact that you just wasted an hour. It is so much easier to just turn up the radio, grip the steering wheel tighter, and pretend you know exactly where you were going.
That captures the psychological resistance perfectly. We desperately want to feel right. Sitting with the discomfort of doubt is an acquired, totally unnatural skill.
Man, that's depressing.
And beyond just the motivational cost, the Oxford academic research points out several structural barriers to why the skill is so unevenly distributed across the population.
What other barriers? Like if I want to be highly metacognitive, what's stopping me besides my own laziness and ego?
While developmental timing is a major factor, the prefrontal parietal network is one of the last areas of the human brain to fully mature.
Really? When does it finish?
Often not until our mid-20s. So we cannot expect a teenager to have fully formed metacognitive control.
Any parent of a teenager knows that.
Exactly. But even more critically, the literature emphasizes that metacognition relies heavily on cultural and educational exposure. It's a tool that must be demonstrated to you.
So you have to be taught how to do it.
Yes, you need specific strategy instruction, which the vast majority of our educational systems simply skip.
That makes total sense. Because schools are almost entirely designed to test horsepower, not the steering wheel.
Exactly right.
They test whether you memorize the historical dates, not whether you evaluated your own internal process for learning those dates. We are literally training out the metacognition by rewarding confident, fast answers over slow, deliberate self-correction.
Precisely. And when you combine an educational deficit with the natural neural variability in the prefrontal cortex—
Wait, variability from what?
from things like genetics, chronic stress, or environmental factors, when you combine all that, you end up with a severe shortage of this capability in the general public.
Which transitions us into, honestly, the most alarming part of this research. Because we've established why I, as an individual, might avoid the sheer discomfort of self-reflection. But what happens when an entire society decides to avoid that effort?
Yeah, the Oxford academic text warns of a very stark reality here. When you have widespread avoidance of metacognitive practice, the immediate macroeconomic result is collective overconfidence paired with terrible error correction.
Confident, but brittle.
Yeah,
But on a massive societal scale.
exactly. When individuals stop monitoring their thoughts, fewer people notice when they've accepted a faulty premise. And practically no one revises their mistaken beliefs when presented with new data.
Because it's too uncomfortable.
Right. And the researchers explicitly warn that this degradation makes a population incredibly susceptible to misinformation, leading to highly unreasonable, cascading collective behaviors.
So what does this all mean for us? Are we just doomed to be a society of confident fools?
Well,
Because looking at social media or political discourse or even corporate leadership on any given Tuesday, it feels like that Oxford warning is already our reality. Everyone's absolutely certain of their own brilliance, and no one is hitting the brakes.
the concern is deeply valid, I won't lie.
Uh,
But the sources do offer an important nuance about how humans historically manage this. Societal unreasonableness is not totally inevitable.
okay, good. Why not?
Because we have built complex social systems to externally compensate for our individual blind spots.
External compensation, like what kind of systems?
Consider the scientific peer review process, or democratic checks and balances, judicial courts, or even just a structured pre-mortem meeting in a corporate setting.
Oh, I see where you're going.
These systems exist for one specific reason: Individual metacognition is naturally flawed and easily exhausted. So these institutions serve as an external board of directors.
Oh, I love that. So if my internal chief risk officer, my anterior cingulate, is too tired or too biased to throw a caution flag at my terrible idea, the peer reviewer's anterior cingulate will do it for me.
Exactly. We outsource the cognitive strain.
We outsource the strain.
Yeah.
That is brilliant.
That is the fundamental function of civil society. But this is where the Oxford text delivers its most critical warning.
There's a catch.
A huge catch.
Right.
These external systems only function effectively when the individuals populating them are exercising their own internal metacognitive checks.
Right. Because the system is just made of people.
Exactly. A system is just a collection of human brains. If you have a society that fundamentally stops valuing and training individual self-reflection, those institutions eventually just become echo chambers.
Ah.
Over the long term, a reduced metacognitive culture degrades decision quality and learning outcomes across every single scale of human organization.
Man, we cannot just outsource our self-awareness to institutions and hope for the best. We have to do the work ourselves inside our own heads.
We have to.
Which brings us to the most actionable part of our deep dive today, hitting the metacognitive gym. We know the societal risks, we know the biological mechanisms, but earlier you said this is highly trainable.
It is very trainable.
So if you, the listener, want to bulk up this neural network, what do you actually do? Because I'm assuming the advice from the experts is deeper than just think harder.
Oh, far deeper. Unlike raw IQ, which remains relatively stable throughout your adult life, metacognition responds beautifully to deliberate, structured practice.
Awesome. Where do we start?
The research divides the training into two distinct priorities depending on your immediate goals: metacognitive monitoring and metacognitive control.
Okay, let's break those down sequentially. First, metacognitive monitoring. The literature says this is essentially calibrating your confidence.
Yes.
And it's the primary tool you need if your goal is better decision quality and reducing reasoning errors.
Yes.
So let's make this real for people. If I am leading a project team at work or making a major financial investment, how do I practically monitor myself?
Calibrating confidence means stripping away binary thinking.
Binary thinking.
Right. Instead of allowing your brain to say, this marketing strategy will definitely work, or this investment is a sure thing, you actively force your prefrontal cortex to assign a strict probability to your certainty.
So I have to put a number on it.
Yes. You ask yourself,
Yeah.
based purely on the evidence my parietal region has gathered, am I 60% sure? Am I 85% sure?
It's forcing yourself to think in bets rather than absolutes.
Exactly. And the most powerful tool for monitoring is routinely asking yourself one specific question.
What's the question?
What specific piece of information would I need to see to completely change my mind?
Oh, I love that.
If you cannot answer that question, you are not engaged in reasoning, you are engaged in blind faith.
Right, because you've already decided you can't be wrong.
Exactly. By defining what would prove you wrong in advance, you prime your anterior cingulate to actually look for that data rather than ignore it.
What would it take to change my mind? It immediately takes your ego out of the driver's seat. Okay, so that handles the decision-making side. What about the other priority? The text mentions metacognitive control for maximizing learning gains.
Right, so control is about strategy selection. If your goal is mastering a complex new skill, say you're learning a new programming language or studying for an advanced medical board monitoring, tells you that you are struggling, but control is what you actually do about it.
Okay, so how do I apply control?
It requires evaluating the efficacy of your own effort. Are you just rereading the textbook for the 5th time, highlighting sentences even though you can't recall the core concepts from yesterday?
Guilty as charged. Highlighting feels like learning because it's easy. It's that cognitive ease you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. It feels like you're doing the work. Metacognitive control is the deliberate intervention where you stop and say, this strategy is flawed. Rereading creates an illusion of competence. I need to intentionally choose a path of higher cognitive resistance.
Higher resistance, so making it harder on purpose.
Yes. You shift your strategy to self-testing or attempting to explain the concept out loud from scratch. You actively become the project manager of your own brain, constantly auditing whether the tool you are using matches the friction of the task.
So for you, the listener, the research presents a very clear directive here. First, identify the domain in your life that requires the most clarity right now. Is it a massive project at work? Is it a complex subject you were trying to master? Or is it your personal relationships?
Oh, relationships are a huge one.
Because let's be honest, how many brutal arguments happen at home simply because someone is 100% confident they remembered a conversation perfectly when their metamemory is actually failing them.
A staggering amount of interpersonal conflict comes down to poor confidence calibration.
So find your domain, and then critically ask yourself how much dedicated time you can carve out to engage in this deliberate practice. Because, as we have established, it is biologically expensive.
It takes real effort.
It does. You cannot check the GPS, recalibrate the route, and evaluate the engine's performance while you are flying down the highway at 90 miles an hour. You have to purposefully build in the pause.
And that pause is where the structural changes in the brain actually begin.
This has been an absolutely phenomenal journey through these sources. To pull all these threads together, metacognition is not a corporate buzzword.
Not at all.
It is a tangible, functional brain network relying on the prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate, and the hippocampus that physically separates brittle, arrogant overconfidence from true, adaptive intelligence.
It is the biological difference between possessing raw horsepower and actually possessing the skill to drive the vehicle through a storm.
Beautifully said. And the most vital takeaway we can leave you with today, especially looking at the stark warnings from Oxford Academic, is this. In a modern world that is practically drowning in algorithmic misinformation, a culture that constantly rewards us for being loud, fast, and relentlessly confident, metacognition is arguably the single most important survival skill we possess.
I couldn't agree more.
Yes, it is profoundly uncomfortable. Yes, it takes massive effort to look in that harsh mirror and admit your own cognitive vulnerability, but we absolutely must start actively training it, start calibrating your confidence, demand to know what would change your mind. Do not leave your brain on autopilot.
And, if we connect this all back to the bigger picture, it leaves us with a critical, kind of provocative warning to reflect on.
What's that?
We established that our complex societal systems, peer review, democratic checks, institutional boards, were explicitly designed to compensate for our individual lack of metacognition.
Right.
But if our culture continues to aggressively avoid the discomfort of self-reflection, what happens when the very institutions we rely on to check our collective errors are entirely populated by individuals who have fundamentally lost the biological capacity to correct themselves?
Wow. That is a chilling thought to end on. If the steering wheel is broken and the driver refuses to look at the map, it really doesn't matter how powerful the engine is eventually, the crash is inevitable. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take the time to step back, audit your own thoughts, and we will catch you on the next one.